And we're continuing with the 43rd chapter of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. We are at the beginning of the final battle. All of the factories have been destroyed, and a congratulatory speech has been made to the boys that are hiding out in the cave with the boss. I picketed the great embankments thrown up around our lines by the dynamic explosion, merely a lookout of a couple of boys to announce the enemy when he should appear again. Next, I sent an engineer and 40 men to a point just beyond our lines to the south, to turn a mountain brook that was there and bring it within our lines and under our command, arranging it in such a way that I could make instant use of it in an emergency. The 40 men were divided into 2 shifts of 20 each. They were to relieve each other every 2 hours. In 10 hours, the work would be accomplished. It was nightfall now, and I withdrew my pickets. The one who had had the northern outlook reported a camp in sight, but visible with the glass only. He reported that a few knights had been feeling their way toward us, and had driven some cattle across our lines, but that the knights themselves had not come very near. That was what I had been expecting. They were feeling us, you see. They wanted to know if we were going to play that red terror on them again. They would grow bolder in the night, perhaps. I believed I knew what project they would attempt, because it was plainly the thing I would attempt myself if I were in their places, and as ignorant as they were. I mentioned it to Clarence. "I think you are right," said he. "It is the obvious thing for them to try." "Well, then," I said, "if they do it, they are doomed." "Certainly. They won't have the slightest show in the world. Of course they won't. It's dreadful, Clarence. It seems an awful pity. The thing disturbed me so that I couldn't get any peace of mind for thinking of it and worrying over it. So at last, to quiet my conscience, I framed this message to the knights. "To the honourable commander of the insurgent chivalry of England, you fight in vain. We know your strength, if one may call it by that name. We know that at utmost you cannot bring against us 25,000 knights. Therefore you have no chance, none whatever. Reflect. We are well equipped, well fortified. We number 54. 54 what? Men? No, minds. The capablest in the world. A force against which mere animal might may no more hope to prevail than may the idle waves of the sea hope to prevail against the granite barriers of England. Be advised. We offer you your lives for the sake of your families. Do not reject the gift. We offer you this chance, and it is the last. Throw down your arms, surrender unconditionally to the Republic, and all will be forgiven. Signed, the Boss." I read it to Clarence, and said I proposed to send it by a flag of truce. He laughed the sarcastic laugh he was born with, and said, "Somehow it seems impossible for you to ever fully realize what these nobilities are. Now let us save a little time and trouble. Consider me the commander of the knights yonder. Now then, you are the flag of truce. Approach and deliver me your message, and I will give you your answer." I humored the idea. I came forward under an imaginary guard of the enemy's soldiers, produced my paper, and read it through. For answer, Clarence struck the paper out of my hand, pursed up a scornful lip, and said with lofty disdain, "Disembowel me this animal, and convey his kidneys to the base-born knave, his master. Other answer have I none." How empty in theory in presence of fact. And this was just fact and nothing else. It was the thing that would have happened. There was no getting around that. I tore up the paper and granted my mistimid sentimentalities a permanent rest. Then to business. I tested the electric signals from the Gatling platform to the cave and made sure that they were all right. I tested and retested those which commanded the fences. These were signals whereby I could break and renew the electric current in each fence independently of the others at will. I placed the brook connection under the guard of authority of 3 of my best boys, who would alternate in 2-hour watches all night and promptly obey my signal, if I should have occasion to give it. 3 revolver shots in quick succession. Sentry duty was discarded from the night, and the corral left empty of life. I ordered that quiet be maintained in the cave and the electric lights turned down to a glimmer. As soon as it was good and dark, I shut off the current from all the fences, and then groped my way out to the embankment, bordering our side of the great dynamite ditch. I crept to the top of it, and lay there on the slant of the muck to watch, but it was too dark to see anything. As for sounds, there were none. The stillness was deathlike. True, there were the usual night sounds of the country, the whir of night birds, the buzzing of insects, the barking of distant dogs, the mellow lowing of far-off kine. But these didn't seem to break the stillness. They only intensified it, and added gruesome melancholy to it into the bargain. I presently gave up looking. The night shut down so black, but I kept my ears strained to catch the least suspicious sound, for I judged I had only to wait, and I shouldn't be disappointed. However, I had to wait a long time. At last I caught what you may call indistinct glimpses of sound, dull metallic sound. I pricked up my ears then and held my breath, for this was the sort of thing I had been waiting for. This sound thickened and approached from toward the north. Presently I heard it at my own level, the ridge top of the opposite embankment, 100 feet or more away. Then I seemed to see a row of black dots appear along that ridge. Human heads? I couldn't tell. It mightn't be anything at all. You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. However, the question was not settled. I heard that metallic noise descending into the great ditch. It augmented fast. It spread all along, and it unmistakably furnished me this fact. An armed host was taking up its quarters in the ditch. Yes, these people were arranging a little surprise party for us. We could expect entertainment about dawn, possibly earlier. I groped my way back to the corral. Now I had seen enough. I went to the platform and signaled to turn the current onto the two inner fences. Then I went into the cave and found everything satisfactory there. Nobody awake but the working watch. I woke Clarence and told him the great ditch was filling up with men, and that I believed all the knights were coming for us, in a body. It was my notion that as soon as dawn approached, we could expect the ditches ambuscaded, thousands to swarm up over the embankment and make an assault, and be followed immediately by the rest of their army. Clarence said they will be wanting to send a scout or two in the dark to make preliminary observations. Why not take the lightning off the outer fences, give them a chance? I've already done it, Clarence. Did you ever know me to be inhospitable? No. You're a good heart. I want to go and be a reception committee. I will go too. We crossed the corral and lay down together between the two inside fences. Even the dim light of the cave had disordered our eyesight somewhat, but the focus straightway began to regulate itself, and soon it was adjusted for present circumstances. We had had to feel our way before, but we could make out to see the fence posts now. We started a whispered conversation, but suddenly Clarence broke off and said, "What is that?" "What is what?" "That thing yonder." "What thing? Where?" "There, beyond your little piece. A dark something, a dull shape of some kind, against the second fence." I gazed, and he gazed. I said, "Could it be a man, Clarence?" "No, I think not. If you notice it looks a lit. Why, it is a man, leaning on the fence." "I certainly believe it is. Let us go and see." We crept along on our hands and knees until we were pretty close, and then looked up. Yes, it was a man, a dim great figure in armor, standing erect, with both hands on the upper wire. And of course there was a smell of burning flesh. Poor fellow, dead as a doornail, and never knew what hurt him. He stood there like a statue, no motion about him, except that his plumes swished about a little in the night wind. We rose up and looked in through the bars of his visor, but couldn't make out whether we knew him or not, features too dim and shadowed. We heard muffled sounds approaching, and we sank down to the ground where we were. We made out another knight vaguely. He was coming very stealthily and feeling his way. He was near enough now for us to see him put out a hand, find an upper wire, then bend and step under it, and over the lower one. Now he arrived at the first knight, and started slightly when he discovered him. He stood a moment, no doubt wondering why the other didn't move on, and then he said in a low voice, "Why dreamest thou here, good Sir Ma?" Then He laid his hand on the corpse's shoulder and uttered a little soft moan and sank down dead. Killed by a dead man, you see. Killed by a dead friend, in fact. There was something awful about it. These early birds came scattering along after each other, about one every 5 minutes in our vicinity during half an hour. They brought no armor of offense but their swords. As a rule, they carried the sword ready in the hand, and put it forward and found the wires with it. We would now and then see a blue spark, when the night that caused it was so far away as to be invisible to us, but we knew what had happened. All the same, poor fellow. He had touched a charged wire with his sword and been electrocuted. We had brief intervals of grim stillness, interrupted with piteous regularity by the clash made by the falling of an ironclad, and this sort of thing was going on right along, and was very creepy, there in the dark and lonesomeness. We concluded to make a tour between the inner fences. We elected to walk upright for convenience sake. We argued that if discerned, we should be taken for friends rather than enemies, and in any case should be out of reach of swords. These gentry did not seem to have any spears along. Well, it was a curious trip. Everywhere dead men were lying outside the second fence, not plainly visible, but still visible, and we counted 15 of those pathetic statues, dead knights standing with their hands on the upper wire. One thing seemed to be sufficiently demonstrated. Our current was so tremendous that it killed before the victim could cry out. Pretty soon we detected a muffled and heavy sound, and next moment we guessed what it was. It was a surprise in force coming. I whispered Clarence to go wake the army and notify it to wait in silence in the cave for further orders. He was soon back, and we stood by the inner fence and watched the silent lightning do its awful work upon that swarming host. One could make out but little of the detail, but we could note that a black mass was piling itself up beyond the second fence, that swelling bulk was dead men. Our camp was enclosed with a solid wall of the dead, a bulwark, a breastwork of corpses, you might say. One terrible thing about this was the absence of human voices. There were no cheers, no war cries. Being intent upon a surprise, these men moved as noiselessly as they could, and always when the front rank was near enough to their goal to make it proper for them to begin to get a shout ready, of course they struck the fatal line and went down without testifying. I sent a current through the third fence now, and almost immediately through the fourth and fifth. So quickly were the gaps filled up. I believed the time was come now for my climax. I believed the whole army was in our trap. Anyway, it was high time to find out. So I touched a button and set 50 electric suns aflame on top of our precipice. Land, what a sight! We were enclosed in 3 walls of dead men. All the other fences were pretty nearly filled with the living, who were stealthily working their way forward through the wires. The sudden glare paralyzed this host, petrified them, you might say, with astonishment. There was just one instant for me to utilize their immobility in, and I didn't lose the chance. You see, in another instant, they would have recovered their facilities. Then they'd have burst into a cheer and made a rush, and my wires would have gone down before it. But that lost instant lost them their opportunity forever. Well, even that slight fragment of time was still unspent. I shot the current through all the fences and struck the whole host dead in their tracks. There was a groan you could hear. It voiced the death pang of 11,000 men. It swelled out on the night with awful pathos. And we will pause there.